And we're back. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for some Final Fantasy II on the Super Nintendo here at Cult Classic Neo. And I'm your host, Michael T. Shamborn III, as always. I want to thank you so much for tuning in. Wanted to jump into some nostalgic play, if you all don't mind. Arguably my second favorite Final Fantasy game of all time, and the first Final Fantasy game I've ever played. Now, this is the Super Nintendo version, not the tricked out Japanese version of the game that apparently was too smart for Americans to play. Nope, this is the old school English American cartridge version because it's my favorite one. I've played all the other versions and I still come back to this one because it's my favorite. And so we're here, the Black Knight Cecil, or Cecil, depending on how you like to do it, here in Mysidia, getting ready to beat up some black wizards. Indeed. So this game is special because it's really not necessarily my introduction into RPGs, because I had played Dragon Warrior prior to this. Never really finished Dragon Warrior, just kind of tried it out. I had also played the original Phantasy Star at a friend's house. I'd played Zork back on the Commodore 64. So, you know, it wasn't my first round with RPGs, but this was the game that made me a role-playing game fan for life. Straight up. And that's the important part. As I turn the volume down on my headphones here so I can actually hear myself. So Cecil, you can see, is conflicted with the mission he's been given. That's going to become important later in the story. So you can see he's admonishing his troops there for somewhat defecting, but you can see he's downtrodden himself, conflicted about the mission he's been given from the king that doesn't make any sense. So this was really one of the first games where I had played and noticed that the characters actually had a lot of depth to them, even though the story is arguably cliched. I mean, what story isn't at this point in the grand scheme of life? But this was one of the first games I played where the character is given so much exposition and backstory, such that you really get to feel for these characters as you play through the game. And at the time, I never really cared for stories in video games, because mostly what I had played up to this point was action platformers, some adventure games like Zelda. You know, I had dabbled in Dragon Warrior and Zork. Never really got into Zork because it's a text-based RPG, and that's never been my thing. But this game introduced me to one of the most important facets of role-playing games for me, and that's leveling. This idea that I could essentially train myself by fighting with monsters in the world to become stronger, to become a better version of myself, and learn new skills and new abilities and make my team a superpower. That's something that's always been important to me in games after having played Final Fantasy II. So, by and large, this is the game that essentially made me a raging role-playing game fan. If it weren't for Final Fantasy II on the Super Nintendo, I don't know that would have happened. Especially because so many of the games I played on other systems never really measured up to this. Like, I played this, and then I played Secret of Mana, which was another phenomenal game that we may get a chance to play here on the channel. We'll see. But it would be a good while before I played another role-playing game that really established itself in my heart the way Final Fantasy II did. Even Final Fantasy III, or 6 if you prefer, wasn't able to do that for me the way Final Fantasy II was. And I think it's the simplicity of play here really rules the day. But it begs the question, though, if we got Final Fantasy here in the States, and then we don't get another one until Final Fantasy IV. I never really understood why that was the case. Now, granted, I've not researched it. I'm sure there's answers for that online. I guess maybe I haven't cared enough to look it up. You know, and eventually we do get Final Fantasy III on Nintendo DS and Final Fantasy II on the PSP. But I just always thought it was interesting that 2 and 3 never released here in the States, and then 5 never released here in the States. We'll be playing that one as well, eventually here, hopefully on the channel. But never really understood why that was the case. So Cecil is beginning to question His Majesty, the King, and Bayon is like, hold up, Slim, what are you doing? And he's dismissed from his post. And here's Brother Cain, Your Majesty. Cecil didn't. Leave with the package. Receive the package. So now Kane's essentially telling you how to play the game, which is cool. I've played it a couple times though, so I think I got it down. We will talk to Brother Cain. So yeah, anyway, Final Fantasy II on the Super Nintendo, or Final Fantasy IV if you prefer. It's the one. It's the reason why I'm such a huge role-playing game fan. It's funny, like, I got up this morning, the day of filming, and I went for a run, did my little ruck run, and that's, for those who may not be initiated, that's running with a heavy backpack on your back. And it was rainy and cold and dreary, and I was like, today's one of those days where you just want to stay in, play some old school video games, get the nostalgia flowing. So these folks are going to teach you all about magic. I'm not going to make you read text on the screen here, but they give you an idea, just to give you one of them. So you get the idea that there's black mages, and over here I believe are white mages, if memory serves me right. Indeed. So they're talking about Rosa, and this was one of those games where there's so many secrets that it basically was what introduced me to the obsessive compulsive need to search like every nook and cranny. Which, not absolutely necessary, but certainly, important, because there are parts of the castle that can be searched that way. Now granted, I'm not going to go through those steps there because it doesn't let you actually do anything. So we're going to go to our room and get some sleeps. Hopefully get a visit from a young lady interest. And there she is, ladies and gentlemen. I also appreciated Final Fantasy II, obviously Rosa being Cecil's love interest. I appreciated that it didn't do the typical Japanese, let's be weird and awkward about this love that we have for this other person, and not communicate it at all in the game, and we're just going to make it really awkward. I think, does he turn him into a piggy? I think one of these mages casts a spell on dude, right? You're that Dark Knight. So those are some of the mages we captured. So just to bring you up to speed, the king sent us to capture the crystal from Mysidia. Cecil's conflicted because the people in that town, there's Sid, the character who's in every Final Fantasy. He's conflicted because he's like, why did we have to go steal the crystal from these people that meant us no harm? And the king obviously like, why are you questioning me? Relinquishes Cecil of command of the Red Wings, which is basically the Royal Air Force in Baron. And there's Sid, ladies and gentlemen, off to the races. So just to kind of explore the castle here, show you what's going on. We got soldiers that got hurt apparently in the raid where nobody was attacked. That's weird. Bunch of guys sitting around playing cards, getting a little bite to eat, a little drink. All right, so nothing up here as you can see, just kind of big open space, but that's cool. Bibbidi bee, bibbidi bee, bibbidi. Alright, so let's get up to the bedroom, get some sleeps. They gives me food, they gives me sleeps. They gives me sleeps. Oh, she changed the sheets. Tell you what, for an officer in the military, this dude is living large. Got his own tower, yo. Where's Kane's tower at? I don't know, Johnny. Never again, even if ordered. So you can see how Cecil's character is developing. He's obviously a good man, concerned with being sent on missions to harm people who mean the kingdom no harm. And that conflict, that internal struggle is going to become very significant as the story progresses. I won't spoil it for you if you've not played this. I mean, it's going to eventually be spoiled, but I'd rather not spoil it now so that when it happens while you're watching this, it'll be enjoyable. I like that he sleeps in his armor, though. That's pretty silly. This game also had one of my favorite soundtracks from back in the day. Very dramatic. This part's dramatic too. I like the way this plays out. Check it. And they set off on a whirlwind adventure. For God, for king, and for country, Cecil and Kane head to the land of mist, where we will read poetry on the screen. Again, dope soundtrack. Very much a fan. 2 moons, by the way. This is also one of the more straightforward storylines in a Final Fantasy game, believe it or not. Thus, the Dark Knight Cecil was expelled from his command as a captain of the Red Wings, and he and Dragoon Kane left Baron for the village Mist, in a valley enclosed in deep fog. Indeed. So yeah, when you get into, airships had been a dream of many people. After the realization of the dream came greed and ambition. This text moves very slow. Through its fleet of airships, Baron became the most powerful nation. But why is Baron seeking the crystals? Why do the monsters keep increasing? The crystal was shedding its light silently. I thought that on the screen there was this one to be born of the dragon or something. Anyway, let's go save the game. So on the world map you can actually save. Yes sirree. Done. Cecil's the Dark Knight. Kane the Dragoon. So yeah, what I was saying was that Final Fantasy IV has one of the more straightforward storylines in Final Fantasy games because, you know, especially when you get to see how searching that little pot gave me a cure, it's dope. Locked. Like when you get to Final Fantasy VII, the stories begin to get so convoluted and ridiculous that they're just hard to follow for no reason, really. All right. Don't want to spend up all the loot, but we do want to have a little bit of help. We did pick up a tent. I'm not going to buy another one. Let's go ahead and exit out and get down to business. So yeah, Final Fantasy's got more and more... Eclectic's not the word. Like, just... weird. It's probably the proper word for how the storyline... And this is my favorite overworld music. One of my favorite songs in all of video games right here. You've heard it here, folks. First, I love this song. Alright, so let's get a random encounter here if we can. There it goes. Alright, we're going to do the jump with Cain to get the needles, and then we're going to kick them. Wop wop. Done. I think the imps have 8 HP. I have way too much of this game memorized. Cain, where you at? Let's go to work. Uh-oh, Cain took a hit. So what I would typically do in a normal playthrough is sit here for like an hour and just level up. I'm not going to do that to you all, obviously. But what we are going to do is get into the cave that heads to the Valley of Mist. And I'm going to thank you all for joining me. I'm going to adjourn here for our first episode in the books, Final Fantasy II Super Nintendo Edition, my favorite edition, one of my favorite role-playing games of all time, my second favorite Final Fantasy behind another Final Fantasy we'll talk about. Hopefully here in the months to come, we'll be playing it on the channel. More to follow on that. But again, allow me to thank you all for watching and for subscribing to the YouTube channel here. Remember that I love you guys, and I will see you on the next one.